and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloney, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership with TEPSA. Each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has inspired, encouraged, or challenged me in one way or another, and allow them an opportunity to tell pieces of their story. I am so excited about this week's guest, Jerry Kraft. Jerry, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Okay, so Jerry Kraft, I was born in Harlem, grew up in Washington Heights, which is the next section up. Have always wanted to be an artist. I've always kind of strived to do books that feature specifically African American kids as regular kids without the weight of the world on them. More contemporary stories to add to like some of the amazing narratives that are already out there.
Right.
And fortunate enough to get the nod finally from HarperCollins. And so in February of this year, February 5th to be exact, that's when they launched New Kid, which I happen to have a copy right here.
There we go.
Yep. And it's been an amazing ride. So I'm ready for any questions that you need to ask.
Well, before we just start talking about Yusum, I want to jump right into the book because, I got a copy of the book when I was at NCTE last fall and got it with a bunch of other books and set up to the side and then picked it up a couple months ago and just fell in love with the story and how accessible it is. But I loved so much the richness of the characters, especially characters in ways we don't normally see them, like kind of what you expressed. Talk to me a little bit about how this story even came to be in your own heart.
Well, I gotta say a quick thing about NCTE. It's so funny because one day my phone just started like going crazy, and I'm getting all these texts and, "Hey man, where are you? You want to meet for lunch," and that. And I'm like, "What's going on?" And it was people from NCTE, and I wasn't even there, so I didn't know anything about it. But they had taken pictures, so they had basically the cover of the book that was blown up like 6 feet tall, in the middle of everywhere, and the HarperCollins booth had like all these books. They were doing giveaways, and I had no clue because I hadn't even been invited. So I was just home like watching football or whatever. So that was really, really cool. And that was one of the first things where like the Harper booth was out of books like the first day.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, and people were going up like, "Hey, are you getting any more?" Like, "Nope, we're done." And then I had a friend of mine that actually videotaped himself talking to the Harper person going, "Where are all the books?" And she's like, "Hey, dude, sorry, but you missed out."
Hey, that's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been very fortunate because I just did 2 shows this in the past week, and they both ran out of books like halfway through. So it's been really pretty amazing. So the book itself, it's kind of a combination of my life and also my 2 sons. All of us are private school kids. I grew up in New York City, much like the main character, Jordan Banks. So, I wanted to do things that were different because my life is very different from how you typically see African American boys portrayed. For one, I grew up in a brownstone. So that house that you see here is the actual house where I grew up.
Oh, cool.
So you don't really see that kind of thing. So this is in Washington Heights, it's brownstone. And although I changed it from the book, but right across the street from us was Marsh Jamel Mansion, which is like one of George Washington's headquarters during the war. And there used to be tour buses that would come every week from like all over the world to actually see that. There was a cobblestone street like right on the side of my house. So, they used to film movies there. They filmed Ragtime and Across 110th Street and one of the last scenes from Malcolm X. And so there was always stuff going on. And me and my friends played stickball and football and loadies or skellies, as some call it. So, it wasn't what you always see portrayed in movies, like only drive-bys we had was, Mr. Softy, and, our shots were on the basketball court. So it wasn't that typical, like straight out of Compton thing that you see so many books and movies portray. And then my two sons, since both my wife and I were private school kids, we sent our kids to private school. But it was different for them because they got to experience it from like kindergarten all the way through, where my parents basically dumped me into Fieldston and Riverdale from ninth grade through 12th grade. So it's just like 30 years of research, one way or the other, partially as a student, and then again as a dad for like 15 years. So that's why I think I was able to connect on so many levels with my readers.
So I
So I
love that
love
it
that
was
it was
written
written
as a
as a
graphic
graphic
novel.
novel.
Was
Was
that
that
something
something
you
you
had
had
in your
in
head from the start?
Yeah, because I've always done comic strips and comic books and then picture books. I've only ever done one prose novel.
Mhm.
But I like that, when you see like the characters, you literally see the characters. And if
Mhm.
I want to have them, it's fall, I don't have to go into a whole lot of detail. I could just, put some leaves here, that's fall, or some
Mhm.
snow, and then I can really focus on the dialogue. And then even inside, since Jordan, like myself, wants to be a cartoonist, I have different his comic strips throughout the book that really kind of get extra insight into his life. And I made sure that there was a dad, you know,
Mhm.
and a mom, and just a lot of things that I really haven't seen. So there's the mom who ended up being one of my favorite characters because she's
Mhm.
pretty silly. Um, and the kids playing Xbox,
Mhm.
shooting hoops, eating pizza, just whatever that just regular kids do. You
Well,
know.
I love the depth that exists within your characters as well, because I could see that book kind of a story like that maybe staying within one lane, but I feel like there were so many little nuggets that I took away constantly as you would introduce new elements of different characters, even though it's mainly about one.
Right.
Throughout the book as it progresses, you introduce little pieces that really deepen your understanding of all the people that are involved in his life. Where do all these characters exist in your past, or did you make some of them up along the way?
So, to a degree, they do.
Hmm.
Um, and then some are kind of combinations
Yeah.
of different characters. So Jordan, like I said, is basically me and my son. And, the grandpa is like my dad. And the way that Jordan is raised is like how my wife and I did. And they're still doing, even though they're 19 and 21, but our job's not over yet. Um, and then there are, certain things I just wanted to fight against stereotypes, no matter what the stereotype was. So, for example, with Liam, who is one of the kids whose parents are pretty wealthy, um, I didn't want to do the typical rich kid that I had seen growing up. It's like when I was coming up, every rich kid was played by like James Spader, who would someone like Anthony Michael Hall, who's just the nicest kid, would just be there, just eating an ice cream, and James Spade would drive up in his Corvette with his cardigan tied around his shoulder and just come and just wail on him for no reason. It was like, oh, that's awful.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I wanted to put some nuances in Liam. I added characters like Maury, who is African American, but he's been in the Riverdale school system for so long that he literally has nothing in common with Jordan. But I wanted to give him a right to exist as well. So whether it is Kirk from around his block, or Drew who goes to school with him, or Maury who has nothing in common with him, I just really wanted to be like, there's no one way to be a black kid,
Right.
and we can celebrate everybody.
So this is your first book, right?
Well, so I self-published my first book in 1997 because I couldn't get traditionally published.
Mhm.
And I basically gave up on the idea of ever being traditionally published because some of the feedback I got was just mean, basically, and it was like, okay, if I wasn't doing what the publishing industry seemed to be looking for, which was, civil rights and slavery and a lot of historical fiction and biographies. And that just wasn't what I wanted to do. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with that, but that's just not what I wanted to bring to the table. And so I self-published my first book based on my comic strip. It's called Mama's Boys as American as Sweet Potato Pie. And that was in 1997. And then 10 years later, I published another. And then I published another. And then people started seeing that. It was like, hey, dude, I can't get published either. So can you illustrate my book? So I basically made a 20-year career out of illustrating other people's books and then publish them either through my own publishing company or through their, company name. And then in 2014, I illustrated the Zero Degree Zombie Zone for Scholastic, which is
Mhm.
like my first, big boy job, that kind of sense. And then I pitched the concept for New Kid. So New Kid is the first traditionally
Right.
published, like by one of the big guys,
Right.
um, that I wrote and illustrated.
Well, as I read the book, I could think of all the different types of kids that I work with that could connect with different characters. As you have now had the book out, and as you get to kind of speak to kids and meet all people who have read the book or experienced it, what has been one of the really neat stories that has stuck out to you of somebody who's really connected with one of your characters?
So that's been the best thing, and I've got like
Mhm.
10 of them. Um, One of them is literally in the mail earlier this week. I got how kids take their school photos,
Mhm.
and they sent me a wallet photo. The kid sent it, and he actually, in his school photo, posed with New Kid
Oh,
in his school photo. So that was pretty amazing.
yeah.
Um, Another one is that I did a Skype visit with kids in New Zealand who identified with the main characters, and that was pretty phenomenal.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I had a dad reach out, and he was like, after reading this, I realized that I was kind of like Andy in your
Mhm.
story, and I was kind of a jerk, and I am opening up discussions with my kids so that they will be better kids and adults than I was. I
That's
thought that
awesome.
was amazing. And then librarians. I had one librarian say, "Oh, well, the librarian there was kind of mean, and she should have done this and this and this." And there were other librarians on Twitter that were like, "Listen, you know what? I had a girl read The Hate You Give and really love it.
Mhm.
And so she asked for more stuff. And then I gave her like some gang books or something like that, like the Mean Streets of South Uptown kind of books, right?" And she said, "You know what? I realized that wasn't what she was looking for. She was looking for another strong African American female character.
Mm.
And I didn't take the time to really dig into what she wanted. So I just gave her like black books with violence, like
Got it.
gang
Mhm.
books kind of deal."
Yeah.
And she said that after reading your book, I realized that I had failed her. and I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and that's something. You talk about
Yeah.
that's some stuff, like
Well,
that.
those are those cool, unexpected moments that you're like, I was not expecting that when I wrote this, but hey, look, that's awesome that that's what it led that person to.
That really like resonated with me, and that was really pretty cool.
So when you think about your stories, do they start with the drawings or do they start with this text?
I start by doing kind of a story arc, and I draw it almost like a roller coaster,
Mhm.
right? And then I add to it, like I will have kind of the roller coaster. I'm like, okay, well, here's the height of the action,
Mhm.
So in New Kid, it was kind of the little turmoil between two of the characters, right?
Mhm.
So then I said, okay, everything is going to kind of lead up to that, and then this is where it gets at its pinnacle, and then afterwards the action kind of dissipates a little. Are the characters changed? Are they better? Are they worse?
Mhm.
And then I went back into that and knew that I wanted the story to start first day of school in September and last day of school in June. So
Mhm.
then I had, back to school. So the back to school zombies, because all the kids are like, still like crazy with sleep. And in October, Halloween, November is when kids go away for Thanksgiving to like these amazing places. And Jordan and his friends, just stayed, staycation kind of things. And then once I did that, then I went to just kind of sketches. I would just
Right.
do like light sketches, where I would just do the whole page
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
Um, and that was what I sent to my editor, were these sketch pages with the word balloons already in, because I wanted him to really see exactly what I was thinking.
That's awesome. So, Jerry, when you think about, I know this answer is going to be a really big answer, and so I don't expect you to have. I just think of one. When
Okay.
you think of all the things in your life that have happened to you, what do you feel like is one of the things that really you look back on and say, because of that, that has played so heavily into the man I am today?
Yeah, there's about five. I actually just did a presentation for the New England Association of Teachers of English, where I basically picked all of those things. Um, so I'll do two quick ones.
Yeah.
Okay. So one is when I was at the School of Visual Arts, um, there was a time when I needed markers to do my homework, and I went down to Pearl Paint on Canal Street in Manhattan, and they literally would not sell me markers because they thought that I was going to use the markers to write graffiti all over the subway. So
Ooh.
even though I showed them my school ID, no, didn't matter at all.
Mhm.
So that's when I was like, okay, I'm not treated really the same as other people, you know.
Right.
Um, and then I think the other was one of the rejection letters that I got early on from a publisher, that it's one thing to get a form letter,
Mhm.
like dear sir or madam, we're not interested. But for someone to take the time to like type up a note that was
Mhm.
basically like, yeah, we're not going to publish this, and we probably won't publish anything else you do because that, like, dude,
Wow.
you know. And I just was really both insulted and
Mhm.
inspired by it, and that's what led me to start my own publishing company.
Mhm.
And then everything I learned from there kind of went into my experience now and what I'm doing with New Kid.
That's awesome. That's some powerful stuff there too. That have really, it's a reminder that we all face those moments of rejection or those things that could be really detrimental to our future, but that if we choose to reflect on it differently, we can use it to move forward and be better.
Yeah.
When you think of your life as a whole, who is someone that you are like, this person really impacted me?
From a distance, it was people like Maury Turner, who was, like the patriarchal, old school cartoonist. He did a strip called We Pals. Ray Billingsley does a strip called Curtis. And a lot is in the past 10 years. I have to say my buddy Eric Velasquez and I just happen a copy of his book. So we because he's someone that while I was doing New Kid and like sometimes drawing, you know, 8 a.m. and then at 11 o'clock, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bed.
Mhm.
I'm going to bed. And then the phone rings. He's like, hey, man, it's like 11 o'clock. He's like, you working? I'm like, yeah, okay. I come back down to the computer and he's painting one of his books and I'm working. And next thing you know, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And it's like, dude, I got to get some sleep. Yeah, me too. All right. All right. I'll talk to you in a few hours. Um, just to know the dedication uh, and seeing that from a peer who
Right.
can relate and you could literally be like, hey man, you know what? I realized I drew the wrong bridge in on page 248. I didn't do the bridge in Kingsbridge. I did the bridge here instead. You think it makes a difference? And he's like, yeah, yeah. To some kid that lives there, it'll make a difference. I'm like, yeah. And I'll go back and redraw the bridge. But I'm always glad when I do. And then he'll do the same with me. Like, hey, what do you think? And I'll help him with some stuff. So that's been one of the best working relationships that I've ever had. And also
So,
my mentor, Barbara Slate, um,
mhm.
who gave me my first job in comics.
Wow.
I did backgrounds on books like New Kids on the Block and Sweet 16 for Marvel Comics and stuff like that. She worked for Marvel. I worked for her. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, and I did some backgrounds on graphic novel called Yuppies from Hell with her. So she kind of taught me the ropes with that. So I'd say those two are the alpha and the beta.
So, if Eric was listening today, what would you say to him in this moment, looking back on everything?
Um, it's really good to have a peer that pushes you.
Mhm.
And, when times are bad, it's like, uh, hey, keep it going. And then to have someone that when times are good are like legitimately happy
Yeah.
for you. Like I'm one of 6 finalists for the Kirkus Award next week. Yeah, which is huge.
Nice.
And like some people you could tell that, and some people you can't.
Yeah.
And I can be like, "Yo," and he's like, "Dude, come on, I'm taking you out. Let's go out to dinner. My treat." As opposed to, "Oh, you think blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah, Mister blah blah blah." I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, if he doesn't know how much I appreciate him, I'm putting it out there to be recorded of how much I
There
appreciate.
we go.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, one question I always love to end on is if there was one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be for the world?
Um, just how much better it can be if we just take the time to listen
Mm.
and learn that just little subtle things. So that's why like I have things where, with the Ramon character, they're always like, all this, oh, you're Mexican, you're Mexican, you're Mexican. It's like, dude, you've known me for 10 years. I'm not Mexican. I'm Ecuadorian,
Uh-huh.
or if someone is Puerto Rican, that's not the same as Dominican, or if they're Korean, don't say that they're Japanese. And, just taking those little extra moments to be kind and listen to how they pronounce someone's name, pronounce it right, spell it right, does it
Mhm.
have two
Mhm.
L's or one L? And those things really do make a difference because
Yes.
it does really show that you are listening. And I think that's the first step for a lot of great conversations. and I wanted this book to inspire those kind of conversations.
I love that. Well, Jerry, I was thrilled when you agreed to come on and have this conversation with me. I loved your book, and I book talked it at just about every event that I've spoken at recently, just because I think it's such a needed and fantastic story for so many of our kids to have access to, and our adults. So thank you for coming on tonight, and I appreciate you so much.
This is what one of my friend Carrie made for me. So it's Oscar the Sock Puppet from Alexandra. So just
I love it.
that. Well, thank you. I had a great time, and thank you for book talking it and helping to spread the word. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank you for everybody listening or watching to another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out all the past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you join me again next week with another great conversation. And remember to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.